She pressed her palm against the taut skin, feeling the soft flutter of life within. "You're strong, little one," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "Just like your daddy." From the tiny kitchen, the scent of simmering beans and stale bread drifted in, humble but warm. Mateus was at the workbench again, sanding a cabinet for a client who'd promised to pay next week. His hands, calloused and steady, moved with a quiet reverence, as though even the wood deserved dignity. Clara smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were tired, deeply tired, not just from the weight she carried, but from the constant hum of worry beneath her ribs. Would the baby come healthy? Would they have enough for diapers? Would the landlord wait just one more month? She stood slowly, wincing as a sharp twinge shot through her lower back. "Mateus," she called softly. He appeared in the doorway instantly, wiping sawdust from his brow with the back of his wrist. His eyes, warm brown, always watchful, flickered with concern. "You okay, Amor?" "Just restless," she said, smoothing her faded dress over her stomach. "I thought I'd go to the clinic today. Sister Ruth said they have new prenatal vitamins. And I need to hear her say everything's all right again." Mateus stepped closer, resting his large hand gently over hers on her belly. "It is all right," he said, though his voice trembled just slightly. "God's got us, Clara. He's carried us this far." She leaned into him, breathing in the scent of wood and sweat and unwavering faith that clung to him like a second skin. "I know," she murmured, "but sometimes I need to see his hands." He kissed her forehead, then her temple, then the swell of her stomach. "Then we'll go. After I finish this trim, I'll walk you." "No," she said quickly, forcing lightness into her tone. "You've got 3 orders due. I'll be fine. It's just down the road." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Clara? I'm not made of glass, Mateus," she said, offering a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes because it came from love, not pretense. "Our baby's got your stubbornness already. We'll be fine." He exhaled, defeated but trusting. "All right, but you call if you feel anything strange. Anything at all." "I will." She kissed him quickly, then stepped outside into the golden haze of the afternoon. The air was thick with salt and the distant cry of gulls. Her worn sandals slapped softly against the cracked pavement as she walked, one hand cradling her belly, the other clutching a small cloth bag with her clinic card and 2 reis for bus fare, just in case she got too tired on the way back. People passed her, some nodding, others avoiding her gaze, as if poverty were contagious. But Clara held her head high. She wasn't ashamed. She and Mateus worked hard. They prayed harder. And every night, before sleep, they knelt together on the thin rug beside their bed and thanked God for what they had, not what they lacked. Still, as she neared the shopping district, the gleaming glass and marble world that felt like another planet, her steps slowed. She usually cut through the plaza to save time. Today, she hesitated at the edge, watching well-dressed women laugh behind designer sunglasses, their voices sharp and careless like breaking crystal. "I can do this," she whispered to her baby. "Just keep your head down. We're almost there." She took a breath, squared her shoulders and stepped forward, into a world that had no idea she existed, until the moment she didn't fit in. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio tópico tu com dialogo como su fosso espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com vida moco. Com os sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters con 3 max high above the coastline. In a penthouse that seemed to float among the clouds, Valentina stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with a crystal flute of chilled, sparkling water in her hand. The city sprawled beneath her like a living map, lights flickering to life as dusk settled, yachts bobbing in the harbor like toys. She didn't see the beauty. She only saw the proof of her worth. "Another flawless dinner, darling?" Daniel said softly from behind her. his voice calm as ever, his presence steady as an anchor in a storm she didn't know she was sailing through. He stepped beside her, not too close, never crowding, just offering his presence like a quiet promise. Valentina didn't turn. Of course it was flawless. I hired the best caterers in the country. Anything less would be embarrassing. Daniel watched her for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful, patient. He knew her moods like a sailor knows the tides. How beneath the surface of her polished sarcasm, something restless stirred. "You seem tense tonight," he said gently. Even before the board members left, she finally turned, her emerald dress shimmering like the ocean at midnight. "I'm fine. Just tired of pretending people care about our foundation when all they want is a photo with your name." He smiled faintly. "Maybe they do, but I care about you. And I've noticed. You haven't been to church in months." The words landed like a feather. But feathers can sting when they touch a bruise you've hidden. "I go when I can," she deflected, turning back to the window. "It's not as if God keeps attendance records." "No," Daniel said softly, stepping closer. "But he keeps hearts." She stiffened. That quiet faith of his, unshakable, gentle, relentless, had once drawn her to him. Now it made her feel exposed. Because she remembered. She remembered kneeling beside her mother in a small country chapel, hands clasped tight, whispering prayers for her father to come home sober. She remembered the smell of old hymnals and the way light fell through stained glass, painting her mother's tears in colors of grace. But those memories belonged to a girl who didn't own a Birkin bag or a villa in Tuscany. "I'm not that girl anymore, Daniel," she said, voice low, almost brittle. "You don't have to be," he replied. "But you don't have to lose her either." She didn't answer. Instead, she set her glass down with a sharp click and walked toward the walk-in closet, heels clicking like metronomes counting down to something she couldn't name. Later that night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside her, his breathing slow, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the duvet, Valentina lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The silence pressed in, heavy and accusing. She thought of her mother's last letter. Tucked in a drawer she never opened. "True worth isn't in what you wear, Valentina, but in how you treat those who can give you nothing in return." She swallowed hard, tears prickling behind her eyes. She blinked them away fiercely. "I'm not cruel," she whispered into the dark. "I'm just careful." But even as she said it, doubt coiled in her chest like smoke. The next morning, she woke before dawn, restless. She scrolled through her phone, emails, luxury brand previews, charity galas, and then paused. A notification from the private security team at Ocean View Mall, incident report filed. Minor altercation near Louis Vuitton entrance. No injuries. Video available upon request. She almost dismissed it, but some restless tug beneath her ribs, made her tap view. The footage showed a pregnant woman in a faded dress, moving slowly, one hand on her belly. Then Valentina, sharp in designer heels and a tailored coat, turning sharply after her shopping bags were jostled. Words couldn't be heard, but her posture, chin high, finger jabbing the air, a dismissive shove that sent the woman stumbling back, told the whole story. Valentina froze. That woman's face, pale, frightened, hands flying to protect her unborn child, haunted her. She was just in the way, Valentina muttered, voice thin. "It wasn't my fault." But her hands trembled as she closed the video. Downstairs, Daniel was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee, reading his Bible like he did every morning before sunrise. He looked up as she entered, eyes soft with concern. "Bad dream?" he asked. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to lie. But the image of that woman's eyes, wide with shock, not anger, but fear, wouldn't leave her. "No," she said quietly, sinking into a chair. "Just remembered what it feels like to be invisible." Daniel didn't press. He simply poured her a cup of coffee. Black, just how she liked it, and placed it before her. Then he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "We don't have to stay invisible to others just because the world tried to make us small once," he said. Valentina stared at her cup, steam curling like a silent prayer. For the first time in years, she didn't feel rich. Clouds. She dressed in silence, careful not to wake him. But he was already awake, sitting on the edge of their thin mattress, hands folded in prayer. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. He looked up, eyes shadowed but tender. "Couldn't. Kept seeing you stumble in my dreams." She knelt beside him, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "I won't fall. You almost did yesterday," he murmured, voice thick. "I saw it in your eyes when you came home. You were shaking." She didn't deny it. Instead, she whispered, "I just didn't want you to worry more than you already do." He turned, cupping her face in his rough hands. "Worrying isn't the problem, Amor. Loving you is. And I love you too much to stay silent when the world tries to make you feel small." Tears welled, hot and sudden. She blinked them away. "Then walk with me today," he nodded. "All the way." Meanwhile, high above the same streets, Valentina stood on her balcony, wrapped in silk, watching the city stir below. The video from the mall played over and over in her mind. The way that woman had flinched, the protective curl of her arms around her belly. It wasn't violence, but it was cruelty. And cruelty, she realized with a sickening lurch, didn't need fists to wound. Daniel had left for an early board meeting, but before he went, he'd left a note on her nightstand: "Lunch at Maria's Kitchen today. They need volunteers. I signed us up." Maria's Kitchen, the church-run soup kitchen in the heart of the working district. Her stomach clenched. She hadn't been down there since she was a teenager, delivering old clothes with her mother. Back then, she'd believed kindness was a duty. Now it felt like exposure, like standing naked in a room full of mirrors. But something in Daniel's note, it wasn't an order. It was an invitation. And for the first time, she wondered if he saw the crack in her soul before she did. She dressed without her usual armor. No heels, no bold lipstick, just simple slacks and a soft blouse. She even left her designer sunglasses behind. By mid-morning, the sun burned off the mist, baking the pavement. Clara and Mateus walked side by side toward the clinic, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. The closer they got to the plaza, the tighter her grip became. "You don't have to cut through," Mateus said gently. "We can go the long way." "No," she said, chin lifting. "I won't let fear reroute my life." He squeezed her arm. "Then I'll be right here." They entered the plaza. A world of gleaming marble, hushed voices, and money that smelled like perfume and privilege. Shoppers drifted like ghosts in linen and leather, eyes forward, never down. And then Valentina. She was walking toward the clinic too, though neither woman knew it yet. Daniel had convinced her to get a prenatal checkup for peace of mind, he'd said, though they'd been trying to conceive for over a year with no success. The clinic was charity-funded, discreet, and, according to Sister Ruth, a place where hearts matter more than handbags. Valentina saw Clara first. Her breath hitched. There she was, the woman from the video. Real. Breathing. Carrying life. Clara saw her next. Time slowed. Mateus felt the shift instantly. The way Clara's body went rigid. The way her fingers dug into his arm like she was holding on for dear life. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're not alone." But Valentina was already moving, not away, but closer. Her steps were hesitant, her face pale beneath her composure. She stopped just a few feet away, hands trembling at her sides. I didn't know you'd be here," Valentina said, voice barely above a whisper. Clara said nothing. She just stood, eyes wide, breathing shallowly, one hand shielding her belly as if instinctively guarding against another blow. This time not of the body, but of the spirit. "I saw the video," Valentina continued, tears welling. I didn't realize how it looked, how it felt." Mateus stepped forward slightly, not threatening, just present. "It felt like shame," he said quietly, "like we didn't belong in the same air as you." Valentina flinched as if struck. "I never meant—" "Maybe not," Clara interrupted, her voice trembling but clear. But words cut deeper when they come from someone who's never been hungry. Silence stretched, thick with unspoken pain and the ghost of regret. Then, from inside the clinic, Sister Ruth appeared in the doorway, her kind eyes taking in the scene. "Clara, you're here early, child." And, "Valentina, what a surprise." Valentina looked at her, then back at Clara, tears finally spilling over. "I came to see if I could help. Not with money, but with presence." Clara studied her, not with anger, but with exhaustion, with a weariness that ran deeper than pregnancy. "Presence costs nothing," she said softly, "but it's the hardest thing to give." Valentina nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." Sister Ruth, ever gentle, placed a warm hand on Valentina's arm. "Come, child. Sit. You look like you haven't slept." Valentina hesitated, then sank into a chair across from Clara. The distance between them felt like miles. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said softly, voice raw. I keep seeing your face. In my dreams. That look in your eyes." Clara exhaled slowly, not unkindness, but weariness. "You saw me. That's rare enough." Before Valentina could respond, the clinic door swung open. A young nurse rushed in, clipboard in hand. "Clara Mendez, Dr. Alves is ready." Clara rose with effort, one hand braced on Mateus's shoulder. As she passed Valentina, their eyes met, brief, electric, full of everything left unsaid. Then, just as Clara reached the hallway, a sudden commotion echoed from the plaza outside. Shoppers shrieked. Tires screeched. A delivery van had swerved to avoid a dog, clipping a stack of designer boxes near the Louis Vuitton entrance, right where Valentina had stood the day before. Instinctively, Clara turned toward the noise, stepping closer to the clinic's glass door to see. And that's when it happened. Valentina, startled by the crash, jerked backward, and her elbow struck Clara's shoulder. It wasn't a shove. Not really. Just a flinch. A reflex. But Clara, off balance from months of carrying life, gasped as her feet slipped on the clinic's freshly mopped tile. Mateus lunged. He caught her just before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her like a shield. But the damage was done. A sharp cry escaped Clara's lips, her face twisting in pain. "Clara!" Mateus's voice cracked like thunder. "Breathe, please." She clutched her stomach, eyes wide with terror. "The baby! Mateus, something's wrong." Sister Ruth rushed over, barking orders to the nurse. "Get Dr. Alves. Now!" Valentina stood frozen, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. I didn't mean to." But no one heard her. The world had narrowed to Clara's ragged breathing, the way her knuckles turned white as she gripped Mateus's shirt, the silent plea in her eyes that said, "Don't let us lose this." Dr. Alves appeared instantly, calm but urgent. "Let's get her on the exam table." Slowly, as they helped Clara down the hall, Valentina followed, steps unsteady, heart hammering. She wanted to disappear, to rewind time, to undo every careless word, every proud glance, every moment she treated someone else's dignity as disposable. In the exam room, Clara lay trembling, tears streaming silently down her temples. Mateus held her hand, whispering psalms under his breath. "The Lord is my shepherd. Yeah, though I walk through the valley." Dr. Alves checked her vitals, listened to the baby's heartbeat with a Doppler. Silence stretched. Then, a steady, strong thump-thump, thump-thump filled the room. Clara sobbed in relief. "The baby's okay," Dr. Alves said, though his expression remained serious. "But you're in early labor signs, Clara. Stress, shock. It triggered contractions. You need complete rest. No walking long distances. No emotional strain." Mateus nodded fiercely. "She'll have it." Then his eyes lifted and locked onto Valentina, who stood in the doorway, pale as ash. "You," he said, voice low but trembling with controlled fury. "You follow us into our world like a storm. First with your words, now with your carelessness. When will it stop? Valentina flinched as if physically struck. I didn't what he cut in, voice breaking. Didn't see her, didn't care, or didn't think she mattered. She had no defense. Only shame. Clara, weak but clear-eyed, whispered, Mateus? It was an accident. But it keeps happening, he said, turning back to her, his voice cracking with love and fear. And accidents don't happen in a vacuum. They happen where pride walks. Valentina sank against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold floor, head in her hands. The weight of her life, her choices, her isolation, her blindness, crashed over her like a wave. Outside, the plaza returned to normal. Shoppers laughed again. Music played from a cafe speaker. The world moved on. But in that small clinic room, time had fractured. And somewhere deep in her soul, Valentina finally understood she hadn't just stumbled into Clara's life. She'd stumbled into her own reckoning. For the quiet rhythm beneath the skin, as though he could anchor their child to this world with sheer will. Valentina hadn't moved from the floor. She sat curled against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, her designer blouse wrinkled, her hair loose from its perfect chignon. She looked less like a socialite and more like a girl who'd just woken from a dream that wasn't hers, and found herself lost in someone else's pain. Sister Ruth knelt beside her, not with judgment, but with a cup of warm chamomile tea. Drink, she said softly. Shock lives in the body long after the mind forgets. Valentina accepted it with trembling fingers. I keep thinking, if I just stepped to the left instead of the right, if I hadn't worn those stupid heels that day. Child, Sister Ruth said gently, regret won't undo what's done, but repentance can build something new from the broken pieces. Valentina looked up, eyes glistening. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? Sister Ruth glanced toward Clara, who now opened her eyes and met Valentina's gaze. Not with anger, but with a quiet, aching sorrow. Forgiveness isn't yours to demand, the older woman said, but it's always yours to ask for. Later that evening, after Clara had been cleared to go home with strict orders to rest, Mateus carried her through their front door like she was made of glass. He laid her gently on their bed, tucked a pillow beneath her knees, and knelt beside her, forehead pressed to her stomach. God, he whispered, voice thick, I know you see us. I know you hear us. Don't let fear steal this miracle. Not now. Not after everything. Clara reached down and threaded her fingers through his hair. We're going to be okay, she said, though her voice wavered. But Mateus, I saw her today. Really saw her. He lifted his head, frowning. Valentina, she's drowning, Clara said softly. Not in money or luxury, but in emptiness. And she doesn't even know how to ask for help. He exhaled sharply. After what she's done. I know, Clara cut in gently. But if we only love those who deserve it. What kind of love is that? He fell silent. Outside, the wind rustled the palms. A distant siren wailed. Then, from the corner of the room, the old radio crackled to life. Mateus had left it on low, tuned to the local Christian station. A hymn drifted through the static, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. Tears filled his eyes. He bowed his head again. Up in the penthouse, Valentina stood alone in the darkened living room. Daniel hadn't come home yet. She'd left 3 messages. Not excuses. Not defenses. Just, I need to talk to you. It's important. She paced, barefoot now, the marble cold beneath her soles. The image of Clara's face, white with fear, eyes wide with betrayal, wouldn't leave her. And worse, the way Mateus had looked at her. Not with rage, but with grief. As if she'd broken something sacred. Her phone buzzed. Not Daniel. Security. She opened the message with dread. Ma'am, per your earlier request, we've reviewed additional footage from the plaza incident today. There's something you should see. Attached was a short clip, taken from a different angle. It showed Valentina stepping back in surprise at the van's screech, and her elbow grazing Clara's shoulder. But more importantly, it showed Clara already turning toward the glass door when it happened, already off balance from exhaustion and fear. The caption read, No intentional contact. Reflexive reaction only. Valentina sank onto the couch, clutching the phone to her chest like a lifeline. Relief flooded her, then shame crashed over it like a wave. Because even if it was an accident, it mattered. Because her presence, her careless, entitled presence, had still brought harm. The door clicked open. Daniel stepped inside, his tie loosened, his eyes heavy with concern. He took one look at her and knew. He didn't speak, just walked over, knelt before her, and took her hands in his. "I saw Clara today," she whispered, "and I almost broke her. Not with my hands, but with my heart." He squeezed her fingers. "Then let your heart be the first thing you mend." She looked into his eyes, those steady, faithful eyes that had loved her through every mask she'd worn. And for the first time in years, she let herself cry without hiding. "I don't know how to be good, Daniel," she sobbed. "I don't even know where to start." "Start where grace meets you," he said softly. "On your knees, with an empty hand, and a willing heart." Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. But in that penthouse, in that quiet moment of brokenness, something began to shift. Slowly, painfully, beautifully. Because the truth was coming. And when it reached Daniel fully, when he learned not just about today, but about the day before, the public humiliation, the careless words, the pride that had nearly cost a life, he wouldn't just be her husband. He'd be justice and mercy, and she couldn't calm. On the fourth morning, rain began to fall. Not gentle drops, but a relentless downpour that drummed against the tin roof like accusation. Clara sat propped up on pillows, staring out the window at the flooded street below. "Mateus?" she said softly. "I keep dreaming of the baby crying, and I can't reach them." He paused at the stove, stirring oatmeal with slow, deliberate movements. "That's fear talking, not truth." "But what if it is truth?" her voice cracked. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if our faith isn't enough?" He turned then, setting the spoon down with a quiet clink. He walked over and knelt beside the bed, taking both her hands in his. His palms were rough, warm, steady. "Listen to me," he said, eyes burning with quiet fire. "God didn't bring us through hunger, through leaky roofs and empty cupboards, just to let us drown in a moment of someone else's pride. He's writing a bigger story, Clara. And this pain, it's not the end. It's the turning." She wanted to believe him, but her body betrayed her. A sharp, deep cramp seized her, different from the others. She gasped, doubling over. Clara Mateus's voice shot up an octave. "It's too soon," she whispered, tears spilling. "Mateus, it's happening." He didn't hesitate. In one motion, he scooped her into his arms, ignoring her weak protests, and rushed out into the rain. The streets were slick, the bus long gone. He ran, boots splashing through puddles, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Rain soaked through his shirt, stung his eyes, but he didn't slow. At the clinic, Sister Ruth met them at the door, already pulling on gloves. "We've been waiting for this," she said grimly. "Come." They laid Clara on the same exam table, but this time, the Doppler silence was deafening. No thump-thump, just static. Dr. Alves worked quickly, his face tight. "She's in active preterm labor. 32 weeks. We need to transfer her to St. Luke's now. They have the NICU." Mateus's knees nearly buckled. "St. Luke's, that's private. We can't." "We'll manage," Sister Ruth cut in, already dialing. "Go. I'll handle the paperwork." In the back of the ambulance, sirens wailing through the storm, Mateus held Clara's hand, whispering verses like lifelines. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you." Clara's eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain and terror. If something happens to him, Mateus, promise me you won't let bitterness take root." He kissed her forehead, his voice breaking. "I promise, but nothing's going to happen. Our son's a fighter, just like his mother." At St. Luke's, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Nurses moved with urgent efficiency. Clara was wheeled into delivery prep, Mateus forced to wait in the sterile, soulless hallway. He sank onto a plastic chair, head in his hands. God, if you're really there, don't let me lose them both. Then a hand on his shoulder. He looked up. Valentina stood there, drenched from the rain. No umbrella, no bodyguard, no pretense. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face stripped bare of makeup, of pride, of everything but raw concern. They told me at the clinic, she said, voice trembling. I came as fast as I could. Mateus stared at her, exhaustion and fury warring in his chest. Why, so you can watch the damage you caused? I didn't come to watch, she whispered. I came to help. He almost laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You think money fixes this? You think showing up now makes you a hero? No, she said, tears falling freely now. I came because I can't live with myself if I don't try. And I called Daniel. He's arranging everything. The NICU, the doctors, all of it. No bills, no questions. Mateus froze. Daniel, you told him, she nodded, shame burning in her gaze. Everything. The first day. The words I said. The way I looked at her like she was nothing. And today, I told him it was my fault she's like this. Mateus stood slowly, towering over her, but the fire in his eyes dimmed. Not gone, but confused. Why would you do that? You could have lied. You could have said it was an accident and walked away clean. Because it wasn't just an accident, she said, voice breaking. It was a pattern, and I'm done pretending I'm not part of it. Inside the delivery room, a sudden flurry of voices. Urgent, sharp. A nurse rushed out. Family of Clara Mendez. Mateus lunged forward. That's me. The baby's coming. Now, 32 weeks. He's small, but his heartbeat is strong. Relief and terror crashed over him at once. Valentina stepped back, pressing herself against the wall as if to disappear. But before she turned to leave, Mateus caught her wrist. Gently. Stay, he said, voice rough. If you mean what you say, stay and pray with me. She looked at him, stunned. Then slowly she nodded. They knelt. There, side by side on the cold hospital floor. One in worn work boots, the other in soaked designer flats. Two souls from opposite worlds, bowing beneath the same weight of hope and fear. And somewhere down the hall, a tiny cry pierced the storm. Life had arrived, fragile, fighting, and fiercely loved. But the real battle, the one for hearts, for justice, for redemption, was only just. Mateus reached out, trembling, but didn't take him. Can Clara hold him? Not yet. She's still recovering. But you can see him in the NICU in just a few minutes. He nodded, throat too tight to speak. He turned to Valentina, who stood frozen a few feet away, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She hadn't moved since they'd knelt together in prayer. You heard him? Mateus asked, voice rough with awe. She nodded, unable to speak. That cry, so vulnerable, so full of life, had struck something deep inside her, something long buried beneath champagne toasts and charity galas. It sounded like the voice of her own childhood prayers, the ones she'd stopped believing God heard. Later, in the quiet dimness of the NICU, Mateus stood before a clear incubator labeled Baby Mendez, 32 weeks. Tiny tubes snaked from his nose, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. But his fingers, curled like rosebuds, moved in sleep. Alive, present. Valentina lingered near the door, afraid to come closer, as if her presence might somehow contaminate this sacred space. He's perfect, Mateus whispered, his voice cracking. Even like this. He's so small, Valentina murmured, stepping forward slowly, as if approaching an altar. He's ours, Mateus said, not with pride, but with a quiet reverence that made her chest ache. She swallowed hard. I keep thinking, if I just walked slower that day, if I'd said sorry instead of watch where you're going, maybe none of this would have happened. Mateus looked at her then, not with anger, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like grace. Maybe, but God doesn't waste pain, Valentina, even the kind caused by someone else's pride. She flinched at the word pride, but didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, What's his name? Elias, Matthias said, a small smile touching his lips. After the prophet who stood alone, but never truly was. Elias? She repeated, tasting the name like a prayer. It suits him. That night, back in the penthouse, Valentina couldn't sleep. The image of Elias, so fragile, yet breathing with stubborn courage, played on a loop behind her eyelids. She tossed in silk sheets that suddenly felt cold and meaningless. She rose and walked to the balcony, the city lights stretching out below like fallen stars. The rain had stopped, but the air still hung heavy with moisture and memory. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. How is she? She typed back. The baby's here. Early. In the NICU. Pause. Then and Clara alive. Exhausted. Terrified. Another pause. Longer this time. Then I'll be home soon. We need to talk. Her stomach twisted. She knew what that meant. He'd seen the full truth now, not just the accident, but the pattern, the arrogance, the way she'd treated a child of God as if she were invisible. She went to her walk-in closet, not for jewelry or dresses, but for a small wooden box tucked behind her handbags. Inside lay her mother's rosary, worn beads, a silver cross tarnished with time. She hadn't touched it in 15 years. She held it now, fingers tracing each bead like footsteps back to a girl who once believed kindness was holier than status. Later, Daniel entered the penthouse quietly. He found her on the living room floor, knees drawn to her chest, rosary clutched in trembling hands. He didn't sit. He stood before her, eyes weary but not unkind. I spoke with the head of security, he said softly. He showed me everything. The first day in the plaza. The words, the looks, the way you dismissed her like she was trash. Valentina didn't look up. I know. You lied to me at first, he continued. Said it was just a bump, an accident. I was ashamed, she whispered. I didn't want you to see me as cruel. But I needed to, he said gently, because you're not just my wife. You're a woman God entrusted to me to love, and sometimes to confront. She finally looked up, tears spilling over. Do you hate me? He knelt before her then, taking her hands, rosary and all. I could never hate you, but I won't protect you from the truth either. Clara and Matthias lost days of peace because of your pride. Elias entered this world fighting because of it. That matters. She nodded, sobbing quietly. I want to make it right, not with money, with presence. Like Sister Ruth said. Daniel studied her face, the realness in her eyes, the rawness of her regret. Then you'll do more than show up, Valentina. You'll stay, even when it's hard, even when they don't trust you, even when forgiveness feels like a bridge too far to cross. I will, she promised, voice breaking. I swear. Outside, the city slept, but inside that penthouse, a soul began to awaken. Not through punishment, but through the painful, beautiful unraveling of a heart that finally chose to see. And somewhere, in a hospital room lit only by the soft glow of monitors, a tiny boy named Elias breathed on, unaware that his life had already begun to change the lives of everyone around him. The storm wasn't over. There she was, Clara, moving slowly through the plaza, one hand on her belly, eyes downcast but posture dignified. And there was Valentina, sharp, polished, untouchable, turning with a flick of her wrist, snapping words too distant to hear but clear in their contempt. The way she'd shoved her shoulder, not hard, but with the careless arrogance of someone who'd never known what it meant to be dismissed. His chest tightened. This wasn't just a social misstep. It was a wound inflicted by entitlement. He closed the laptop and walked to the window. Rain had returned, soft now, misting the glass like tears. He thought of Elias, fighting for breath in a plastic box. He thought of Matthias, kneeling in a hospital hallway, whispering psalms like armor. And Clara, so tired, so brave, carrying a child into a world that had already shown her its cruelty. His phone buzzed. Sister Ruth. Daniel, she said without greeting, voice low and urgent. Clara's stable, but Elias. They're worried. His oxygen levels dropped twice last night. They're calling in a specialist from Sao Paulo. He closed his eyes. I'll cover it. Whatever they need. I know you will, she said gently. But that's not why I'm calling. Mateus overheard a nurse say the private wing admitted a VIP donor's wife yesterday. He put two and two together. He knows Valentina's been coming. And he's scared. Not of her, but of what her presence means. That this, his son's fight, is tied to her world. Daniel exhaled slowly. He's not wrong. He asked me one thing, Sister Ruth continued, voice thick. He said, "Is this grace or guilt?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove not to the hospital, but to the modest carpentry shop on Rua das Oliveiras. The sign above the door read Mateus and Son. Honest work, faithful hands. It had been painted weeks ago, before Elias was born, before hope had been tested in fire. Mateus was sanding a cradle, small, smooth, crafted with trembling precision. He looked up as Daniel entered, hands stilling on the wood. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mateus said, "You came alone." "I did. No bodyguards. No lawyers. Just you." "Just me," Daniel confirmed, stepping forward. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply stood, shoulders squared, eyes steady. "I saw everything, Mateus. All of it. From the first day in the plaza to the moment Valentina nearly knocked Clara down." Mateus's jaw tightened. "Then you know she's the reason my son's fighting for air." "I know she played a part," Daniel said carefully. "But I also know pain doesn't have a single author. It's woven from many threads. Pride, fear, indifference. And my wife, she chose hers carelessly." Mateus set the sandpaper down. "Why are you here?" "To ask your forgiveness, for her and for myself." That surprised him. "You didn't do anything." "Didn't I?" Daniel's voice softened. "I built an empire while ignoring the cracks in her soul. I gave her everything but truth. I let her believe status was strength. That's my failure too." Mateus studied him, the billionaire in a simple linen shirt, no watch, no tie, just a man carrying his own regret like a stone in his chest. "And Valentina?" Mateus asked. "Does she really regret it, or is this just another performance?" "She's broken," Daniel said honestly. "Not because of consequences, but because she finally saw Clara. Not as a shadow, but as a sister. And that seeing, it shattered her." Mateus turned back to the cradle, running a hand over its smooth curve. "Elias should have been rocked in this by now." "He will be," Daniel said. "But first, he needs to breathe." Silence settled between them, heavy but not hostile. Then Mateus spoke, voice low. "She wants to help. I see it. But every time she walks into that NICU, I feel like I'm reliving that moment in the plaza. Like my wife's dignity is still on the floor, and no amount of money can pick it up." "I know," Daniel said. "So don't let her walk in as a donor. Let her walk in as a woman asking for a chance to learn how to see." Mateus looked up, eyes glistening. "And if she fails again, then we'll be there to catch her," Daniel said. "And to remind her and ourselves that grace isn't earned. It's given, even when we don't deserve it." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. A single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the wet cobblestones. Daniel turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing," he said. "I've asked the hospital to keep Valentina's visits discreet. No special treatment. She'll sit in the same chairs, wait in the same lines. If she's serious, she'll accept that." Mateus nodded slowly. "Then let her sit, and wait, and learn." As Daniel stepped back into the gray afternoon, his phone buzzed. A message from Valentina. "I'm at the hospital. They won't let me see Elias unless Clara says it's okay." He typed back, "Then sit, and pray, and don't ask for anything. Just be there." He didn't tell her it would be easy. He didn't promise Clara would say yes. But as he drove toward the hospital, heart heavy yet hopeful, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the truth had been spoken. He knelt in the back pew, head bowed, hands gripping the edge of the worn wood like it might anchor him to something solid. The sanctuary smelled of old hymnals, candle wax, and the faint salt of tears shed by generations before him. "God," he whispered, voice raw. "I said I wouldn't let bitterness take root, but it's already there. I see her, Valentina, standing in that NICU like she belongs, and all I feel is rage. Not because she's rich, but because she got to walk away from that plaza like it meant nothing. And Clara, our son, they're still paying." His breath hitched. "I thought I was strong. I thought my faith was enough. But right now, I feel like Peter in the boat. I'm sinking, Lord, and I don't know if I can keep my eyes on you." A soft creak echoed behind him. He didn't turn. He knew that step, gentle, unhurried, full of quiet strength. Sister Ruth settled into the pew beside him, her hands folded over her Bible, her presence a balm even in silence. After a long moment, she said, "You didn't answer my call this afternoon." "I couldn't," he admitted, voice breaking. "Every time I hear Elias's monitor beep, I see her face, and I hate that. Hate the sin," Sister Ruth said softly. "But don't confuse the sinner with the sickness." "She hurt my wife," he said fiercely. "She looked at Clara like she was dirt. And now she's sitting outside that NICU for the third night in a row," Ruth replied. "No driver, no coat even though it's cold. Just a woman with a Bible and a heart full of regret." Matthias turned to her, eyes burning. "Is that supposed to make it okay?" "No," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "But it's supposed to make you ask what would Jesus do with someone who caused pain." And finally sees it, he looked away, jaw clenched. "You know the answer," she pressed gently. "You've read Luke 7. The woman with the alabaster jar. The one everyone called a sinner. Jesus didn't wait for her to earn forgiveness. He let her weep at his feet and called it worship." Matthias squeezed his eyes shut. "But this isn't just about her. It's about Clara. About Elias. What if she leaves again? What if this is just guilt wearing a pretty face?" "Then you protect your family," Ruth said firmly. "But don't close the door on grace just because you're afraid it might leave. That's not faith, Matthias. That's fear dressed as wisdom." Silence settled between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city and the soft crackle of the sanctuary's old furnace. Then, from his pocket, his phone buzzed. A text from Clara, "She's still here. Outside room 312. Just sitting. Doesn't knock. Doesn't speak. Just waits." Matthias swallowed hard. "Clara says she's still there." Sister Ruth nodded. "Waiting is its own kind of prayer." He stood slowly, legs stiff from kneeling. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "You don't have to," Ruth said, rising with him. "Not yet, but you can choose not to harden your heart. That's where healing begins." He walked toward the exit, then paused at the door. "What if I fail? Then you come back," she said, smiling gently. "This church has seen stronger men fall, and kinder ones rise." Outside, the night air was cool and damp. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking. Not toward home, but toward the hospital. As he turned the corner, he saw her. Valentina sat on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp, knees drawn to her chest, Bible open on her lap, but her eyes weren't on the page. They were fixed on the third-floor window of room 312, where a tiny light glowed beside Elias's incubator. She looked small, human, no designer coat, no perfect hair, just a woman trembling in the cold, praying with her whole body. Matthias stopped a few yards away. She didn't notice him at first. Then, as if sensing his presence, she looked up. Their eyes met. No words, no accusations. Just two souls standing on opposite sides of a chasm carved by pride, pain, and the fragile hope of something new. Slowly, Matthias took a step forward. Then another. He didn't speak. He simply sat on the far end of the bench, his hands folded, his gaze also lifting to that third-floor window. Valentina didn't move, but after a long moment, she whispered, so softly he almost missed it, "I named him in my prayers, Elias, every night." Matthias didn't look at her, but he nodded. And in that silence, fragile, trembling, charged with everything unsaid, a bridge began to form. Not of forgiveness yet, but tonight was different. Clara had been discharged that morning, weak but determined, and now she sat in a wheelchair just inside the hospital's side entrance, wrapped in a thin shawl, staring out at the bench where Valentina sat alone. She'd watched her for 20 minutes already. This woman who'd once looked through her like she was air, now sitting in the cold with nothing but remorse and a worn-out Bible. Mateus stood beside her, hand resting on the chair's handle. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know," Clara whispered, "but I keep thinking, what if no one had ever given me a second chance, where would I be?" He didn't answer. He just squeezed her shoulder. Then, gathering every ounce of courage she had left, Clara motioned for him to push her forward. The wheels rolled softly over the damp pavement. Valentina didn't notice them at first. Her head was bowed, lips moving in silent prayer. "Psalm 51, Clara said gently, stopping a few feet away. Valentina looked up, startled. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears she didn't try to hide. You came," she breathed. "I did," Clara said. Her voice was weak, but clear. "You've been out here every night." Why? Valentina swallowed hard. "Because I don't deserve to be inside. Not after what I did. But I couldn't stay away." She looked toward the window. "I pray for Elias. Every word, every breath. I ask God to let him grow strong. To let him know he was loved. Even before he was seen." Clara studied her. The raw honesty in her eyes, the absence of performance, the tremor in her hands. "Do you really see me now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Or just the guilt I make you feel?" Valentina flinched. "At first, it was guilt. But now I see you. Your strength, your love, the way you carried that baby like he was the whole world. Even when the world treated you like you were nothing." Her voice broke. "And I'm so ashamed, Clara. Not because I might lose Daniel's respect, but because I failed to see the image of God in you." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. "That image, it's still there, even after everything." "I know," Valentina whispered, "and I want to learn how to honor it." Silence settled between them, filled only by the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the city. Then Clara extended her hand. Not in forgiveness, not yet, but in invitation. "Come inside," she said. "Not as a donor, not as a socialite, just as someone who's hurting too." Valentina stared at the hand, trembling. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse?" "You already did," Clara said gently. "But maybe we can make something better together." Valentina reached out, fingers brushing Clara's, hesitant, then firm. As Mateus wheeled Clara back toward the entrance, Valentina stood, clutching her Bible like a lifeline. She took a deep breath and followed. Inside the NICU hallway, the air was cool, sterile, humming with quiet urgency. Nurses moved in practiced silence. And there, through the glass of room 312, Elias lay in his incubator, smaller than before, but his chest rising with steadier rhythm. Valentina stopped short, hand flying to her mouth. "He opened his eyes this morning," Clara said softly, "just for a second. But he looked right at Mateus." Valentina's tears fell freely now. "He's beautiful. He's ours," Clara said. Then, after a pause, "And maybe he's yours too, in the way that changes people." Valentina turned to her, eyes wide with disbelief. "You'd let me be part of his life?" "I don't know yet," Clara admitted honestly. "But I know this: if God can use a broken woman like me to carry life, he can use a broken woman like you to protect it." Just then, the NICU door opened. Daniel stepped out, holding 2 cups of tea. He saw Valentina and didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "You stayed," he said simply. "She came inside," Clara replied, glancing at Valentina. "And she hasn't run." Daniel handed her a cup. "That's where healing starts." Later, as they all stood together by the window, poor and rich, broken and seeking, a nurse emerged with quiet urgency. "Mr. and Mrs. Mendez," she said. "Elias is stable enough for skin-to-skin contact. If you'd like, you can hold him now." Clara's breath caught. Mateus helped her stand, supporting her as she stepped into the room. And Valentina, she lingered outside the door, not daring to enter. But then Clara turned at the threshold, looked back and said, "Wait." Valentina froze. "Not in here," Clara clarified softly. "But wait for us. After. There's something I want to show you." Valentina nodded, heart pounding. Inside, Clara held Elias for the first time. His tiny body pressed against her chest, his breath warm against her skin. He nuzzled instinctively, seeking the heartbeat that had carried him through storm after storm. Outside, Valentina leaned against the wall, weeping silently. Not from pity, but from awe, because in that moment, she understood love wasn't about status, or money, or even apologies. It was about showing up, and staying, and letting your heart break open so grace could rush in. But even as hope bloomed, a quiet dread stirred beneath it, because Daniel's phone had just buzzed with a message from the hospital administrator. The press found out about the donor connection. They're asking if Valentina's involvement was a PR stunt. The world was watching. Daniel entered quietly, 2 paper cups of coffee in hand. He set one beside her. They're already calling it a redemption arc for the socialite who accidentally funded a poor woman's miracle baby. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. Valentina didn't look up. "I didn't say a word." "They don't need you to," he said, sitting beside her. "The security footage from the mall leaked last night. Not the full thing, just the clip of you shoving Clara." Her stomach dropped. "Who would? Someone who thinks this is a scandal, not a story of grace." He hesitated. "Valentina, they're framing it like you paid for silence. Like this whole NICU stay was hush money." She finally looked at him, eyes wide with panic. "But it's not. I know," he cut in gently. "But the world doesn't care about truth when drama sells better." Down the hall, the NICU door opened. Clara emerged, wrapped in a light sweater, face pale but composed. She walked slowly toward them, her steps unsteady but resolute. "They're talking about us, aren't they?" she asked, voice quiet but steady. Daniel nodded. "The headlines are brutal. Calling you the pregnant prop in Valentina's PR play." Clara's eyes flickered to Valentina. Not with anger, but with sorrow. "Is that what people think, that my son's life is a performance?" Valentina stood abruptly, hands trembling. "I swear, Clara, I didn't." "I know you didn't," Clara said softly. "But what they think, it matters. Because now, every time I hold Elias, someone will whisper, 'She sold her pain for a billionaire's check.'" Valentina's breath hitched. "Then let me fix it. I'll go on record. I'll tell the truth. About the plaza. About my pride. About everything. And they'll twist it," Daniel said grimly. "Say you're desperate for relevance. That you're using a poor family to feel holy." Silence fell heavy between them. Then Clara took a deep breath. "There's only one way out of this." "What?" Valentina asked. "Truth. Unfiltered. Not through press releases. Not through interviews. Through presence." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara looked at Valentina, eyes steady. "You said you wanted to learn how to see. Now's your chance. Come with me." "Where?" Valentina whispered. "To my church. Sunday. We're baptizing Elias." Valentina's eyes widened. "You'd let me be there?" "Not just be there," Clara said. "Stand with us. Not as a donor. Not as a celebrity. As a witness. Let them see you kneeling beside me. Not because you have to, but because you choose to." Daniel exhaled slowly. "The press will be there. They always are when my name's involved." "Then let them see what real grace looks like," Clara said firmly. "Not perfect people. Just broken ones choosing love anyway." Valentina swallowed hard. "I'm terrified." "Good," Clara said, a faint smile touching her lips. "That means you're ready." Later that evening, Back in the penthouse, Valentina stood before her closet. Not to choose an outfit, but to confront a lifetime of armor. She pulled out a simple white dress she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral. Modest, unadorned, humble. Daniel found her holding it, tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "What if I stumble? What if I say the wrong thing?" He stepped closer. "Then you'll be human. And that's exactly what they need to see." She looked at him, searching his face. "Do you still trust me?" He took her hand. "I trust the woman you're becoming, not the one you were." That night, she knelt by her bed. Not in the grand prayer room lined with gold-framed scriptures, but on the cold floor of her bedroom, where no one could see her. She opened her Bible to Luke 15, the prodigal son, and for the first time she wept not for herself, but for the father who ran. Because Sunday wasn't just about Elias's baptism. It was about her own return. And as the city slept, unaware of the quiet revolution forming in 3 hearts, then, on Thursday evening, as rain pattered against the clinic's roof, Sister Ruth pulled Matthias aside after he delivered a repaired pew for the chapel. "There's something you should see," she said, leading him to her office. On her desk lay an envelope, thick, cream-colored, sealed with a simple wax stamp bearing no name. "It came this morning," she said. "Addressed to you. No return." Matthias opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. The letter read, "Matthias, I know you don't trust my intentions. You shouldn't. But I also know Clara worries about bills, about stability, about bringing Elias home to a roof that leaks when it rains. This key is to a small house. Not grand, not fancy. Just 3 rooms, a kitchen, and a porch wide enough for a cradle and a Bible. It's paid for. Utilities included. For 1 year, no strings. I'm not asking for thanks. I'm asking for a chance to walk beside you, not above you. V." Matthias stared at the paper, jaw tight. "She thinks a house fixes what her words broke." Sister Ruth placed a gentle hand on his arm. "No, but maybe she's finally learning that love isn't a transaction. It's a home." He didn't answer, but that night he walked the 10 blocks to the address on the key. The house stood at the edge of the working quarter, modest, painted pale yellow, with a small garden already planted with rosemary and lavender. A porch swing swayed gently in the breeze. The front door opened easily. Inside, sunlight filtered through clean windows. A bassinet sat in the corner of the main room. Hand-carved, smooth, familiar. Matthias recognized his own style. She'd commissioned it. From him, without telling him. He ran a hand over the wood. His hands had made this, but her heart had asked for it. Tears burned his eyes, not because of the gift, but because, for the first time, it didn't feel like charity. Felt like remembrance. Back at the penthouse, Valentina paced her bedroom, heart racing. She hadn't told Daniel about the house. She'd used her own private account. Money she'd inherited from her mother, untouched for years. This can't be his generosity too, she'd told herself. It has to be mine. Her phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "We saw the house." Matthias didn't say much, but he sat on the porch for an hour, just looking at the sky. Valentina's breath caught. Then another message. He didn't say thank you, but he said, "She finally saw us." Valentina sank onto the bed, sobbing quietly. She'd spent her life building walls with wealth. Now, for the first time, she'd used it to build a door. But the real test was coming. Sunday, the baptism, and the press. Because as she'd feared, the rumors had spread like wildfire. Billionaire's wife funds poor woman's baby to silence scandal. Cameras would be there. Microphones. Questions sharp as knives. That night, she knelt again. Not in her closet, but in the empty chapel of their private estate. Rain tapped the stained glass, casting fractured light across the altar. "God," she whispered, "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to be real, even if it ruins me." Outside, thunder rolled. And somewhere, in a yellow house with a new cradle and a mended roof, Elias slept peacefully. Unaware that his tiny life had already begun to stitch together inside, the chapel smelled of beeswax and old wood. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the pews in fractured colors of mercy and judgment. Clara sat in the front row, Elias swaddled in a white linen cloth against her chest. His eyes were open, wide, dark, alert, as if he too sensed the weight of the moment. Matthias stood beside her, jaw set, fingers clutching a worn Bible. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw headlines twisting their pain into entertainment. Then the side door opened. Valentina stepped in. She wore the simple white dress. No jewelry, no heels, just flat sandals and her mother's rosary looped around her wrist. Her hair was loose, her face bare. She didn't scan the room for cameras. She looked only for Clara. Their eyes met. No words, just a nod. Valentina walked slowly down the aisle, not with her usual confidence, but with the quiet humility of someone entering sacred ground. She sat in the second-to-last pew, alone, hands folded in her lap. Daniel entered moments later, dressed in a plain navy suit, no tie. He didn't sit with Valentina. He sat in the back, deliberately separate, so the focus wouldn't be on wealth but on witness. Sister Ruth appeared at the pulpit, her voice calm but firm. Today, we do not baptize for show. We baptize because a child born too soon, fought for fiercely, loved beyond measure, belongs to God. And because 3 families have chosen, in the face of scorn, to let love be louder than shame. A murmur rippled through the few local congregants. Outside, a reporter snapped a photo through the stained glass. Then Sister Ruth turned to Clara. "Are you ready?" Clara stood, Elias cradled in her arms. "I am." As she walked toward the baptismal font, a simple stone basin filled with rainwater collected that morning. Valentina rose too, not because she was asked, but because she couldn't stay seated while grace moved. She stopped a few feet behind Clara, tears already glistening. Sister Ruth paused. "Valentina, do you stand here as a spectator or as a sister?" Valentina's breath caught. "As someone who's learning how to be a sister." The older woman nodded. "Then stand with her." Valentina stepped forward, slowly, trembling, until she stood shoulder to shoulder with Clara. The room fell utterly silent. Outside, a camera shutter clicked. Inside, Elias cooed softly, as if he knew. Sister Ruth poured water over his forehead, her voice ringing clear. "Elias Matthias Mendez, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, redeemed not by wealth, not by status, but by love that sees you, knows you, and calls you beloved." Clara wept openly. Matthias reached for her hand, and, after a heartbeat of hesitation, for Valentina's too. She flinched at first, then gripped his hand like a lifeline. In that circle, poor, rich, broken, seeking, something holy passed between them. Not forgiveness complete, not trust restored, but a covenant begun. As they turned to leave the font, the chapel doors burst open. A reporter stepped in, microphone extended. "Valentina, can you confirm this baptism is part of your image rehab after shoving a pregnant woman in the plaza?" The room froze. Valentina turned slowly. Her face wasn't angry. It was sorrowful. "No," she said, voice steady, clear, carrying to every corner of the chapel. "This isn't about my image. It's about my repentance. I did shame Clara, not just with my hands, with my heart. I treated her like she didn't matter, and I was wrong." Gasps filled the room. "Then why are you here?" the reporter pressed. "Because grace doesn't wait for you to be worthy," Valentina said, glancing at Elias, then at Clara. "It meets you in your shame and says, 'Try again.' So I'm trying." She turned back to the group, ignoring the cameras, and knelt beside Clara. "I don't expect your trust," she whispered, "just for them. But I'll spend every day earning it." Just then, Elias let out a soft cry, not of distress, but of presence. Alive, here, now. And in that sound, louder than any headline, truer than any narrative, the real story unfolded not of scandal, but of salvation. But as they stepped outside into the waiting storm of lenses and questions, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a dark suit stepped out, Daniel's head of security. He approached Daniel, voice low. "Sir, there's been a leak. Someone sent the full security footage from both days to every major news outlet. It's going live in an hour." Daniel's face went pale, because the full footage didn't just show Valentina's shove. It showed Clara's stumble. And then, seconds later, Valentina rushing toward her, calling for help. Something the cropped, viral clip had deliberately omitted. Valentina, huddled in a fragile circle, as if their combined presence could shield the truth from distortion. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening. "It's live," he said quietly. "The full footage." Valentina's breath caught. All of it, he confirmed. "Every second. From the first insult in the plaza to you kneeling beside Clara after she fell." Clara looked up, eyes wide. "They'll see you tried to help. They'll see everything," Daniel said, "including what the edited clip hid." Outside, a news anchor's voice cut through the noise. "Breaking update: new footage reveals billionaire socialite Valentina Ribeiro didn't just shove a pregnant woman. She stayed, called for medical help, even offered her coat." Murmurs spread through the reporters. Some lowered their cameras. Others frantically typed into their phones. Valentina didn't move. She just stared at the ground, tears streaming silently. "I didn't do it for them to see," she whispered. "I did it because I finally saw her." Mateus exhaled slowly, the rigid line of his shoulders softening just slightly. "Maybe that's the point," he said, voice low. "Grace isn't grace if it's performed, but it's still grace, even when it's seen." Just then, a young reporter, woman with kind eyes and a frayed notebook, stepped forward, separating herself from the pack. "Mrs. Mendez," she asked gently. "May I hold him just for a second?" Clara hesitated. Then, after a glance at Mateus, nodded. The reporter held out her hands, trembling slightly. As Elias was placed in her arms, her breath hitched. "He's so light," she whispered, "like a prayer." And then, to everyone's shock, she turned to Valentina. "You could have walked away, but you didn't." Why? Valentina looked at her, not as a journalist, but as another woman who carried invisible weights. Because once you see someone's pain, you can't unsee it. And if you walk away after that, you're not just cruel, you're dead inside. The reporter's eyes glistened. She didn't write anything down. She just nodded, handed Elias back to Clara, and walked away, leaving her microphone on the steps. The crowd grew quieter. Then, from the chapel steps, Sister Ruth appeared, holding a tray of lemon water and small paper cups. "Thirsty?" she asked the reporters with a gentle smile. "Truth is easier to carry when your throat isn't dry." A few journalists actually took cups. One even said, "Thank you, ma'am." In the midst of the storm, an unexpected calm began to bloom. But back in the chapel, alone for a moment, Valentina sank onto a pew, trembling. Daniel found her there, head in her hands. "I thought I was ready," she whispered, "but seeing my cruelty on screen, over and over, it's like watching a stranger." "But it was me." He sat beside her. "Then let that stranger die today," he said softly. "And let the woman who kneels beside Clara, without cameras, without applause, that woman, let her live." She looked at him, tears spilling over. "Do you think people will believe I've changed?" "I don't care if they do," he said, taking her hand. "I care that you believe it." Outside, the wind shifted. Clouds parted. Sunlight broke through, glinting off wet pavement and camera lenses alike. And in that light, something shifted, not just in headlines but in hearts. Because the world had expected a scandal. But what they found was a story, not of perfection, but of people proud, broken, stumbling, choosing again and again to reach across the chasm. And in that reaching, finding grace. But even as hope swelled, a quiet dread remained. The footage had cleared. Full footage reveals Socialite's hidden act of compassion. From plaza shove to hospital vigil, a story of unlikely redemption. But Valentina didn't read them. She sat in the back pew of the same chapel, alone this time, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the baptismal font. Elias's tiny footprint, pressed into wet clay by Sister Ruth as a keepsake. sat on the pew beside her, wrapped in linen. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Clara's face. Not in fear, but in quiet strength. And she kept asking herself, was it enough the chapel door creaked open? She didn't turn. She knew that step. Daniel said you'd be here, Clara said softly, stepping inside. Elias was in a sling against her chest. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of her shawl. Valentina stood quickly, brushing dust from her skirt. I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed to be where he was claimed. Clara smiled faintly. He's claimed everywhere he goes now. By God, by us, and by you in your own way. Valentina's throat tightened. I don't deserve that. Maybe not, Clara said, walking closer. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about showing up, even when you're shaking. She paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This came to the clinic this morning. No name, just this. Valentina took it, hands trembling. It was a printed still from the security footage. Valentina, kneeling beside Clara after the stumble, one hand on her shoulder, mouth open in what looked like a plea. Are you okay, please? Let me help. Scrawled at the bottom in neat handwriting, you saw her when it mattered. Now keep seeing her, even when no one's watching. Valentina's breath hitched. Who sent this? Clara shook her head. The security team won't say. But Daniel thinks it might have been someone who works at the mall. Someone who watched everything. And believed you were more than your worst moment. Tears spilled over. I don't even know their name. Maybe that's the point, Clara said gently. Sometimes grace comes anonymously, so you can't repay it. You can only pass it on. Just then, Elias cooed, stretching his arms toward Valentina. Her eyes widened. He reached for me, Clara watched surprised. He's never done that with anyone but Mateus and me. Valentina hesitated. Then, slowly, held out a finger. Elias grabbed it with surprising strength. His dark eyes locked on hers. In that tiny grip, something shattered inside her. Not pride this time, but the last wall around her heart. He knows, she whispered. He knows I'm trying. Clara nodded, tears in her own eyes. He sees with God's eyes. They stood in silence for a long moment, the morning light warming the chapel floor, the only sound Elias's soft breaths and the distant cry of gulls. Then Clara said, Daniel told me about your idea, the community center for pregnant women in need. Valentina blinked. He told you, he said you've been meeting with church leaders, planning it in secret. No press, no naming rights, just service. I couldn't undo what I did, Valentina said softly. But maybe I can help make sure no other woman feels invisible while carrying life. Clara stepped closer until they were nearly shoulder to shoulder. Then, let me help you build it. Valentina looked at her, stunned. You'd work with me? You're not the woman from the plaza anymore, Clara said. And I'm not the woman who fell. We're both becoming something new. Together. Outside, a car slowed near the chapel. Not a news van, just a modest sedan. The driver stepped out, Mateus, holding 2 paper bags of fresh bread and a thermos of coffee. He saw them through the stained glass. Clara, Valentina, Elias's tiny hand still wrapped around Valentina's finger. And for the first time, he didn't tense. He smiled. Not a grand gesture, just a quiet lifting of the corner of his mouth. But it spoke volumes, because trust isn't built in speeches. It's built in moments like this, when a man sees his wife's pain held gently by the hand that once caused it, and chooses to believe in redemption. But as they stepped out to meet him, Valentina's phone buzzed in her pocket. An unknown number. She opened the message with dread. You think it's over? The real truth hasn't surfaced yet. Ask your husband about Project Aurora. Her blood ran cold. Daniel had never mentioned Project Aurora. And if someone was threatening to expose it, whatever it was, the peace they'd just begun to build might crumble before it ever took root. She forced a smile as Daniel approached, but her fingers curled around her phone until her knuckles turned white. The warmth of the morning, the quiet joy in Mateus's laugh, the weight of Elias still resting against Clara's chest. All of it suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. That night, after everyone had gone, Clara and Mateus back to their new yellow house, Elias asleep in a bassinet carved with love. Valentina stood on the penthouse balcony, the city glittering below like a sea of secrets. Daniel found her there, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You've been quiet," he said, setting a mug beside her. She didn't look at him. "Who is Project Aurora?" He froze. Not a flicker of confusion, not a pause, just stillness, like a man who'd been waiting for this question his whole life. "Where did you hear that?" he asked, voice low. "An anonymous text, right after the baptism." She turned to him, eyes searching his face. "Daniel, what is it?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't a project. It was a cover. Years ago, before we met, my company was involved in a land acquisition in the Amazon. We misrepresented environmental impact reports, called it Project Aurora, to make it sound like renewal. It was anything but." Her stomach dropped. "Did people suffer? Indigenous families were displaced. A river was poisoned. 2 children died from contaminated water." His voice broke. "I didn't know the full truth until it was too late. By then, the board had buried everything. I tried to fix it quietly, paid reparations, funded clean water, but I never went public. I was afraid it would destroy everything I'd built, including us." Valentina stared at him, heart pounding. "So all this, your faith, your charity, your insistence on truth, it was what a penance?" "No," he said fiercely, stepping closer. "It was a rescue. God didn't let me drown in that guilt. He pulled me out and gave me you and this second chance and a purpose beyond profit. But I've lived every day knowing the truth could rise like a ghost." She turned back to the city, tears blurring the lights. "And now it has." They stood in silence, the weight of his secret pressing between them like a third person. Then Valentina whispered, "If this comes out, Clara and Mateus will think we used Elias to launder our conscience." "Worse," Daniel said. "They'll think I orchestrated Valentina's redemption to distract from my past." She closed her eyes. "We have to tell them first." He looked at her, stunned. "You'd risk losing everything, their trust, the center, even our marriage, just to be honest. If we don't," she said, voice trembling but clear, "then everything we've built is just another performance. And Elias deserves better than that." The next morning, they met at the yellow house. Clara answered the door, Elias in her arms, sunlight catching the gold in his newborn hair. Mateus stood behind her, wary but calm. Valentina didn't sit. She didn't offer excuses. "I need to tell you something," she said, hands clasped tight. "Not as a billionaire's wife, not as a donor, just as someone who finally learned that truth is the only ground grace can grow on." She glanced at Daniel. He stepped forward. "Before I met Valentina, before I knew God, I was part of something evil, a project that hurt innocent people. I tried to make it right in secret, but I never confessed publicly. And now, someone knows, and they're threatening to expose it, using our connection to you as proof that this whole thing was a cover-up." Clara's eyes widened. Mateus's jaw tightened. Silence stretched, thick with betrayal and fear. Then Clara spoke, voice quiet but steady. "Did you hurt us?" "No," Daniel said instantly. "Never. This was years ago. But the timing, it looks like manipulation." Mateus looked at Valentina. "And did you know?" "Not until last night," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I'm telling you now, because you deserve truth, not convenience." Clara looked down at Elias, then back at them. "Then you've already chosen the harder path. That matters." Mateus exhaled slowly. "If this comes out, people will say we were used." "Yes," Daniel admitted, "and we can't control that, but we can control what we do next." Valentina took a step forward, voice breaking. "I don't expect forgiveness, but if you'll let me, I want to stand with you through this, not as a savior, as a sister who's finally learning to see. Clara studied her, really studied her, then nodded slowly. Then we face it together. Because if grace is real, it doesn't vanish when the truth gets ugly. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the newly planted lavender in the garden. And in that moment, for souls rich and poor, guilty and wounded, did the Mendes family become pawns in a redemption scheme by sunrise. The yellow house was surrounded. Not by reporters this time, but by silence. Neighbors avoided eye contact. The bakery that had donated bread stopped answering Clara's calls. Even the church parking lot felt emptier, as if faith itself had grown cautious. Inside, Clara rocked Elias in the new porch swing, her face pale but composed. Mateus stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes scanning the street like a soldier expecting siege. Valentina arrived alone, no driver, no bodyguard, wearing the same simple dress from the baptism. She carried a basket fresh bread, goat cheese, and a small pot of rosemary from her penthouse garden. She stopped at the gate, hesitant. "I didn't know if you'd want me here." Clara looked up, eyes tired but warm. "We said we'd face it together." That didn't vanish with the headlines. Valentina stepped inside, setting the basket down. Her hands trembled. "Daniel's holding a press conference at noon. He's going to confess everything, publicly. No spin, no lawyers, just truth." Mateus finally spoke, voice low. "And if they destroy you both, what happens to the center, to Elias's future?" "Then we rebuild," Valentina said, voice breaking. "On honesty, not reputation." Clara nodded slowly. "Good." Just then, Elias stirred, letting out a soft cry. Valentina instinctively moved forward, then stopped, glancing at Clara for permission. Clara handed him over without a word. As Valentina cradled him, tears spilled silently down her cheeks. "He still trusts me," she whispered, "even when the world doesn't." "He sees your heart," Clara said, "not your headlines." A car pulled up, Sister Ruth, stepping out with a thermos and a stack of printed letters. "From the congregation," she said, handing them to Clara. Not all of them believed the noise. Clara opened one. Her breath caught. "We've watched you carry that baby through fire. We know your character, and we stand with you." Another read, "My daughter was displaced by a corporate project too. If Daniel's telling the truth now, maybe healing can start." Hope flickered, small but real. Then Daniel's car appeared at the end of the street. He stepped out, tie loose, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He didn't head to the podium waiting downtown. He walked straight to the yellow house. "I canceled the press conference," he said, voice raw. Valentina stared. "What, why?" "Because truth isn't just for cameras," he said, looking at Clara, then Mateus. "It's for people. And if I'm going to confess, I need to do it where it matters, on my knees, not on a stage." He knelt right there on the porch, on worn wood, in front of the man whose wife he'd indirectly shamed, whose son's life had become entangled in his past. "I was wrong," Daniel said, voice cracking. "Not just in business, in belief. I thought wealth could fix sin. But it can't. Only humility can. And I'm asking, not for your forgiveness, but for the chance to walk beside you as I learn what it means to live redeemed." Mateus looked down at him for a long moment. Then he knelt too, not to accept, but to meet him at eye level. "You hurt people," Mateus said quietly. "But you're not hiding now. That's something." Clara stood, Elias still in Valentina's arms. "Then let your confession be lived, not just spoken. Help us build the center. Not as a billionaire, but as a builder." Daniel nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will." Just then, a news van turned onto the street, but instead of stopping, it rolled slowly past, the reporter inside giving a small, respectful nod. The narrative was shifting, not because the past was erased, but because the present was being lived with courage. Yet as the four of them stood together, two couples from opposite worlds, bound by pain, truth, and a baby who'd become a bridge, a different kind of message arrived, not on a screen, but in an envelope left at the church doorstep. Handwritten, no return address, You think confession ends the story. But Aurora isn't just a project. It's a person. And she's coming. Valentina read it last, after everyone had gone inside. Her blood turned to ice. Because Aurora wasn't just a code name. It was a child's name. And if someone out there bore that name, and knew what Daniel had done, then the real reckoning hadn't begun. Valentina like a shadow she couldn't outrun. She'd shown it to Daniel in the dead of night, both of them sitting on the cold marble floor of the penthouse kitchen, the words burning between them. A child, Daniel had whispered, face ashen. There was a girl, daughter of one of the village leaders. They called her Aurorina, Little Dawn. She was 7 when the river turned brown. She died 3 weeks later. Valentina had covered her mouth, tears spilling silently. And someone's using her name as a threat. Or, Daniel's voice broke, or she's alive, and she knows. Now, on the morning of the community center's first planning meeting, Valentina stood outside the yellow house, arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth. Clara opened the door before she could knock. You look like you've seen a ghost, Clara said gently. Maybe I have, Valentina replied, stepping inside. Elias was on the floor, propped on a blanket, eyes wide as he watched sunlight dance on the wall. He gurgled when he saw her, and the sound, so pure, so trusting, nearly undid her. Mateus entered from the kitchen, holding 2 mugs. Daniel's on his way, he said. He needed to speak with us before the meeting. As if on cue, Daniel's car pulled up. But he wasn't alone. A young woman stood beside him, early 20s, dark eyes burning with quiet intensity, wearing simple clothes and a silver pendant shaped like a rising sun. Valentina's breath caught. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. This is Aurora. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Clara instinctively moved toward Elias, pulling him into her arms. Mateus stepped slightly in front of them, protective but not hostile. Aurora didn't flinch. She just looked at Daniel, then at Valentina, with a gaze that held lifetimes of pain. I wasn't supposed to live, she said, voice calm but steady. My fever broke on the 3rd night. The doctors said it was a miracle. My father called it a curse. He said the river took my name, so I had to carry it like a warning. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know you survived. You never looked, she said simply. You sent money. You called it justice. But you never came back. You never asked if we buried her, or if she woke up. Valentina stepped forward, heart hammering. Why are you here now? Aurora turned to her. Because I saw the footage. I saw you kneel beside that pregnant woman. And for the first time, I wondered, maybe not all rich people are ghosts. She paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small, water-stained notebook. This was my father's. He wrote every name of every person who suffered because of Project Aurora. Over 200, including mine, marked lost. But I'm not lost. She handed it to Daniel. I came not for revenge, but for truth. And if you're truly building something new, I want to help, because pregnant women in my village still walk miles for clean water. And no one sees them. Clara's eyes welled. You want to join the center? I want to lead the outreach, Aurora said firmly. Not as a victim, as a voice. Daniel sank into a chair, the notebook clutched to his chest like a relic. I don't deserve your trust. No, Aurora said, but you're offering your hands. That's a start. Mateus exhaled slowly, then extended his own hand. Welcome. And just like that, the ghost of the past didn't haunt them. It joined them, later that afternoon, as they gathered around the kitchen table. Blueprints spread out, coffee steaming, Elias asleep in his cradle. Valentina looked around at the faces Clara's quiet strength, Mateus's guarded hope, Daniel's repentant resolve, Aurora's fierce grace. She reached for Clara's hand, then Daniel's, then Aurora's. We're building more than a center, she said, voice trembling. We're building a family. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the yellow house in gold. But inside, something even brighter was taking root. Forged not in perfection, but in shared brokenness, honest confession, and a baby who taught them all how to see. Yet as night fell, Aurora stood alone on the porch, staring at the stars. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to an unknown contact. They're real. And they're ready, with hand-stitched tapestries from Clara's neighbors, shelves filled with donated prenatal vitamins, rocking chairs arranged in a circle. Valentina adjusted a banner that read, "House of Hope, where every life is seen." Her hands trembled, not from nerves, but from the weight of what this place meant. Not redemption, not atonement, but presence. Daniel stood by the entrance, welcoming early arrivals. Pregnant women from the working quarter, elders from the church, even a few reporters who'd once been vultures but now carried notebooks with something like reverence. Then Aurora arrived. She didn't come alone. Behind her walked 3 women, dressed in traditional Amazonian patterns, faces lined with sun and sorrow, eyes sharp with resilience. One carried a baby wrapped in a crimson cloth. Another held a woven basket filled with medicinal herbs. "These are the mothers of Rio Verde," Aurora said softly. "The village project Aurora poisoned. They came to bless this place and to join it." Clara stepped forward, Elias in her arms, and knelt, just slightly, so she could meet their eyes. "You're home," she whispered. One of the women placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, then on Elias's head. "He carries light," she said in accented Portuguese, "like dawn after long night." Mateus, standing near the cradle he'd built for the center's nursery, felt his throat tighten. This wasn't charity. It was kinship. As the ceremony began, Sister Ruth lit a single candle at the center of the room. "We gather not because we are perfect," she said, voice warm and steady, "but because we've been seen in our brokenness and loved anyway." Valentina stepped forward, not as a speaker, but as a witness. She turned to Clara, then to Aurora, and finally to Daniel. "I used to think worth was earned through perfection," she said, voice shaking but clear. "But Elias taught me that life begins in vulnerability. And this center, it's not about fixing people. It's about saying, 'You matter exactly as you are.'" Tears glistened in Aurora's eyes. She stepped forward next. "My name means dawn. For years I thought it was a cruel joke because my childhood ended in darkness. But today, I see that dawn doesn't erase the night. It rises through it." She looked at Daniel. "You can't undo the past, but you can build something in its shadow that casts light forward." Daniel didn't speak. He simply knelt, not in shame but in solidarity, and began serving tea to the women from Rio Verde, his hands steady, his heart open. Later, as the sun set and guests drifted home, the 5 of them, Clara, Mateus, Valentina, Daniel, and Aurora, stood in the empty center, Elias asleep in a bassinet beside them. "He'll grow up here," Clara said softly, touching his cheek, "among stories of pain and grace." Valentina looked at Aurora. "Will you stay?" Aurora smiled faintly. "I was sent by my village, but I think I was also led here. This is where healing becomes action." Just then, Elias stirred, stretching his arms toward Valentina. She picked him up gently, heart swelling as his tiny fingers curled around her thumb. "Do you think he knows?" she whispered. "How many lives changed because he fought to breathe?" Mateus stepped closer, placing a hand on Valentina's shoulder, no longer stiff, but warm with trust. "He doesn't need to know. He just needs to be loved." Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. But inside that humble hall, something eternal had taken root. Not wealth, not fame, but a covenant. Forged in truth, watered by tears, and held together by the quiet courage of people who chose to see each other and stay. And as the candlelight flickered on the walls, casting long, dancing shadows, it was clear the arrogant socialite hadn't just learned humility. The poor carpenter hadn't just found help. The billionaire hadn't just confessed. The daughter of pain hadn't just returned. And the baby hadn't just survived. Together, they had become a living answer to a broken world's deepest question: can grace really bridge the chasm between us? And in that room, bathed in golden light and shared silence, the answer echoed, not in words, but in